to welcome everybody to the May 9th, 2023 hybrid meeting of the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee. Today, we have three ordinances that will be heard in committee and acted upon. The first relates to King County District Court electoral district boundaries. The next adds new language to voting materials. And the last item is an ordinance concerning the servicing of summons and processing of lawsuits against the county. I'd like the clerk to now call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Cole-Wells.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott. Councilmember Upthegrove.
Here.
Chair Von Reitbauer.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to ask, in absence of the vice chair, I'd ask Councilmember Upthegrove this early morning to move the approval of the March 23rd, 2023 meeting.
Thank you. I move the minutes of March 23, 2023 be approved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Our next proposal is proposed ordinance 2023-0104. It's relating to King County District Court electoral district boundaries for 2023. Erica Newman from the Council Central Staff will give us a staff report. Erica, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erica Newman, Council Central Staff. The items for proposed ordinance 2023-0104 begin on page 6 of your packet. The proposed ordinance would amend Ordinance 16803 in King County Code. The proposed ordinance is the companion ordinance to Ordinance 19577, which was adopted back in February 23 to approve the 2023 voting precinct alterations that reflect annexations, precinct balancing, and changes made to the Seattle City Council and Seattle School Director district boundaries. The changes for the proposed ordinance are administrative in nature, as the geographical boundaries of district court electoral districts have not changed but are statutorily required. There is a striking amendment which would make technical changes to include serial commas and clarifying language. Council's legal counsel has reviewed the ordinance and found no issues. If there are any questions, we have Presiding Judge Matthew York from District Court and Kendall Hodson, Chief of Staff for Department of Elections. Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much, Erica. I would also call upon Judge York if you wanted to add any comments at this time. Judge York. It's always a pleasure to see you again.
Pleasure to see you, sir. I have no further comments on the matter. I wanted to make sure I was here answering questions.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I'll sit down.
Thank you. Always good to see you, sir. I just wanted to make sure I was available for any questions. I have no comments on the matter.
Any questions of the presiding judge? Thank you again for being here. Kendall, did you have any comments as well? Kendall Lee Van Hudson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Kendall Hodson with Elections. No comments from us. This is administrative. We really appreciate you all taking quick action on it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call upon my colleague, Councilmember Upthegrove, to move the ordinance and then also help me with the amendments, if it's all right. Councilmember.
Thank you. I move that proposed ordinance 2023-0104 be approved.
Okay, we have that before us. I'd like to call upon Councilmember Upthegrove for a motion to move striking amendment S1.
Thank you. I move adoption of striking amendment S1.
I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Then at this time, I would ask if my colleagues would permit us to put this on the consent calendar going forward. Thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the roll on proposed ordinance 2023-0104 as amended?
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Cole-Wells.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember Upthegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Chair Von Reitbauer, pardon me, and the vote is 4 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you very much. By your action, proposed ordinance 2023-0104 as amended is recommended on the consent calendar to the Polk County Council. Thank you again. Our next item is proposed ordinance 2023-0152 relating to translated voting materials. Sherry Sue is here from the Council Central staff who will give us a staff report, and then we'll proceed from there. Sherry, thank you again for being here this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sherry Sue with Council staff, and the materials for this item begin on page 24. Proposed ordinance 2023-0152 would codify the provision of voting materials in Somali and Russian. King County Elections currently provides voting materials and services in English, Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, and Korean as required by code. Council has already approved funding to support adding the 2 new languages, and the proposed ordinance would just add the language requirement to code. I'll just start by briefly summarizing federal law and county code relating to translated voting materials. I am at the top of page 25. Under federal law, King County would be required to provide all elections materials that are available in English, also in languages spoken by certain minority language populations that have been historically excluded from the political process. The languages mandated by federal law are limited to Spanish, Asian, Alaskan Native, and Native American languages, and the threshold would be that an area has at least 10,000 limited English proficiency speakers in the voting age populations, or if the limited English proficiency speakers make up at least 5% of the voting age population. To meet this federal threshold, elections added voting materials in Chinese in 2002 and in Vietnamese in 2012. Because of the limited scope of what's covered by federal law, in 2015, Council amended code to require elections to expand the translation of voting materials beyond what was required by federal law. Ordinance 18086 required elections to provide voting materials in Spanish and Korean, to review language data in the county and report to council every 5 years on whether any languages meet the threshold of 10,000 or more limited English proficiency speakers and county residents, and to provide materials in any languages determined to meet that threshold. In order to meet these new county code requirements, elections added voting materials in Spanish and in Korean in 2016. In 2018, Council passed an ordinance that required county agencies to develop plans to provide communications and vital documents in the top 6 non-English languages identified by OESJ and by the county demographer. And right now, King County Elections provides services in 4 of these languages, but not Somali or Russian. In early last year, to meet the reporting requirement under Ordinance 18086, elections transmitted the 2022 Language Access Report. And in the report, elections recommended adding voting materials in Somali and Russian. As I mentioned, in the biennial budget last year, Council approved funding to support these new positions. Moving on to the analysis section, and I'm on page 26. The proposed changes to code are summarized in the table on page 26. The changes would be in King County Code, Chapter 2, Section 16. There are some technical changes and some restructuring changes, but I'll just point out the one substantive policy change would be to add Somali and Russian to the list of required languages for voting materials. Next, I'd like to summarize some of the language data that's in the report, as well as some updated data since then, and I'm on page 27. The report that was transmitted last year is based on 2019 census data, and at the time, Somali and Russian did not yet meet the threshold of 10,000 limited English proficiency speaker county residents where they would be required by code, but elections recommended adding these languages based on data from various sources. That data is summarized in a table on page 27, that's table 1. And in this table, I've also included 2021 census data, which was released after that report, just for reference. So what's highlighted in orange are Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean. Those are the 4 languages other than English that are currently provided. And then highlighted in blue are Somali and Russian, which are the 2 that we're discussing today. Looking at Table 1, again, this is on page 27, following the 4 currently offered languages other than English, Russian has the next highest number of speakers who have limited English proficiency. And while Somali has fewer limited English proficiency speakers than Tagalog or Japanese, Somali has a higher number of limited English proficiency students, a higher number of court cases requesting interpretation of WIC interpreted results, and public health clinic visits. In addition to considering the number of speakers with limited English proficiency, that report also considered the percentage of speakers who have limited English proficiency. And this is shown on Table 2 and 3. This is on page 28. Table 2 shows 2019 census data, which is what that report was based on. And then Table 3 includes 2021 census data, just for reference, since that was released after that report. Looking at Table 3 on page 28, other than the 4 languages that are currently offered and codified, Russian and Somali have the next highest percentages of speakers who have limited English proficiency. Those are 41% and 39%, respectively. Moving on, the report also reviewed what language voters requested when registering to vote. This is shown in Table 4 on page 29. Following the 4 currently offered languages, Russian and Somali have the next 2 highest number of voter registrations. Moving on to the bottom of page 29. As part of that language access report, elections did conduct outreach with community service providers to learn about the trends that they're observing in their communities. And in these conversations, one of the takeaways was that there lacked translated materials for an East African language, and also that Somali was the most cited language that needed translation and interpretation support. In terms of funding, as I mentioned, Council has approved funding first in the August 2022 supplemental budget, and then in the 2023-24 biennial budget, the positions were approved for FTE as ongoing FTE. Just moving on to a discussion of implementation. Elections has been preparing to launch services in Somali and Russian this year in 2023. Of the 4 FTE, Elections has filled 3 positions, and they're actively recruiting for the last position. Since the start of this year, Elections has been working on translating materials, and they plan to be available ahead of the 2023 primary election this August. The plan for rollout includes outreach campaigns to ensure that community members are aware of the new services. And some of that outreach includes earned media, advertising, social media campaigns, and working with the Voter Education Fund partners. Finally, I'll just end with a related policy consideration. This is at the bottom of page 30, and this relates to the Citizens Elections Oversight Committee. So the CEOC currently has 16 members, and that includes representatives from the Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Spanish-speaking language communities. Code requires that the CEOC include a representative from any language community where the county would be required to provide voting materials under Section 203, which is federal law. As I mentioned, right now, Somali and Russian are not currently required under federal law, and so based on current code, those community representatives would not be required. If Council were to pass this proposed ordinance to codify requiring Somali and Russian materials, a potential policy consideration for Council would be whether to add positions representing those language communities to the CEOC. That concludes the staff report. There is a technical striking amendment. Mr. Chair, I can brief that if you'd like.
Please do.
Thank you. So there's a technical striking amendment S1. It's on page 73. It is purely technical. It makes some edits to the proposed ordinance like capitalization, spelling, serial commas, and clarifying language. We have from Elections, Kendall Hodson, Chief of Staff from Elections, who is available for questions. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kendall, can you give us a reflection from the Director's Office of the importance of this, and also whether or not you think you can meet the deadline or the projected deadline of the primary of 2023?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to be here today. For the record, Kendall Hodson, I'm the Chief of Staff for King County Elections. Very little would keep Director Wise from joining you today, but she is on a plane to join other auditors at a conference. So you get me today. She sends her regards, and I'll be really brief after that excellent report from Council staff. First, I just got some thank yous. Thank you to Councilmember Upthegrove and Dabowski for sponsoring this legislation. Thank you also to the entire council for your unwavering support in making sure that every King County voter has the opportunity to make their voice heard. I also do just want to acknowledge our wonderful language access and community engagement team. I know many of them are watching this committee hearing and are anxiously awaiting this legislation. So they are the ones who make language access a reality and do the really important work of connecting with community on the ground. I know we're all really keenly aware that it's more important than ever to really redouble our commitment to democracy and ensure access for our voters, regardless of their race, their income, their gender, their age, or the language that they speak at home. You all already approved budget for this work, and we've been really busily preparing. What that means is voters are going to be able to do absolutely everything with us in these languages. So they will get their ballot in language, they will get their voters pamphlet in language. That includes more than 650 candidate statements for our local elections this year. Their voter registration card will be in language. Any correspondence about their signature, our text alert program, our website, and then of course, just good old fashioned customer service. And the early response from community has been really enthusiastic. As we've brought on our new team members, we've met really engaged voters, community leaders, and organizations really in every corner of the county who are excited about this, this change in service. Just recently, our team was telling me a story. They're often at naturalization ceremonies as folks become naturalized citizens. And they've met folks who are brand new citizens who are Russian speaking, who are so excited that for the first time voting in this country, they're going to get to fill out their ballot in their language. And that really matters to that voter, to King County, and really to democracy. So we really appreciate you considering this legislation. Passing this means that regardless who is elected to be the director of elections, or frankly for council or the executive, this access remains because as staff mentioned, the Federal Voting Rights Act, it doesn't cover the full breadth of languages spoken in our region. We think this is really important. So really appreciate you considering this. We're excited about the rollout. We have no concerns about getting this rolled out before the August primary, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. This time I'd like the prime sponsor of the ordinance to move the ordinance, and then we'll address the striking amendment. Councilmember Upthegrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that proposed ordinance 2023-0152 be adopted.
Okay, and we have a striking amendment as well.
Thank you. I move adoption of striking amendment 1.
We have that for us. All in favor of the striking amendment 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Perhaps you want to speak to this. I know you've worked very hard on this issue and you care deeply about this because it impacts so many people in your district as well. Councilmember Upthegrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think both of our districts have a large Russian population in particular, and Somali. I want to echo the themes that Kendall so eloquently spoke of. When I became chair of the council earlier this year, I thought about, what do I want to accomplish, or what do I want us as a body to do together this year? And I talked at that first meeting about supporting our democratic institutions and demonstrating as a local government how democracy can work and being a model for those institutions. That means things like supporting independent courts, freedom of speech, the rule of law, but it also means access to free, fair elections. And King County has always done an exceptional job, and our fabulous election director, Julie Wise, has continued to expand access so that as many people as possible can participate. And ensuring that we have voting materials translated in these additional languages, Somali and Russian, is one additional step forward to making that very fundamental bedrock principle of democracy, the right to vote, come alive through better access. And it's, as was noted, this is something we've already budgeted for and planned for. So I don't think there would be any burdens there. I do want to note also that my experience is that translation alone is not a silver bullet. Simply translating materials doesn't automatically result in increased participation. But fortunately, the team at elections does much more than that. Kendall spoke of the Voter Access Fund, where we work with members of the different cultural communities, using leaders from those communities to help communicate and share information. And I think those two strategies really come together nicely, having materials available in the language and then also doing that community-based outreach. And so I think this is really exciting, and I hope it continues to make it easier and facilitate participation in our elections, because, you know, if what they say, a nation of sheep begets a government of wolves. And if people want to make sure that a government at all level is reflecting their values and priorities, then they've got to get out and vote. And we need to make it easy and accessible for everyone to do that. And this ordinance, I think, is an exciting step forward.
Thanks for your comments, and thank you for your prime sponsorship of this proposal. At this time, I'd like the clerk to call the roll on proposed ordinance 2023-0174 as amended.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, it's 0152. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. 0152. Okay, thank you. You're right. I was ahead of myself. And if there's no objection, we'll put this on the consent as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Cole-Wells.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Chair Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Chair, the vote is 4 votes to nil.
Proposed ordinance 2023-0152 as amended is recommended to the full county council. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, Up the Grove.
Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask, perhaps we don't put this on consent. I think myself and Councilmember Dembowski and others might want the opportunity to reflect on the importance of voter participation and expansion at council. We have a very light council meeting next week, and so I think there's time.
I will not object to this heavy issue, and thank you very much for our light council meeting. Nick, we'll just keep that off the consent calendar. Is that all right?
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Again, now I'm getting ahead. I was getting ahead of myself earlier to propose ordinance 2023-0174, also introduced by Councilmember Up the Grove. It's relating to the servicing of summons and processing of lawsuits. Nick Bowman from the Central Staff is here to give us a staff report. Nick, can you proceed?
Good morning, council members. For the record, Nick Bowman, Council Central Staff. The materials for item number 6 begin on page 81 of your packet. Proposed ordinance 2023-0174 would make the Director of the Records and Licensing Services Division responsible for receiving and processing lawsuits against King County. Currently, the Clerk of the King County Council is the designated agent upon which lawsuits against the county may be served. The proposed ordinance would also remove some emergency service processing provisions that were established in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. For a bit of background, state law provides that the King County Council may designate an agent to be served notice of a lawsuit against the county. Under King County Code 204010, the Clerk of the Council is that designated agent. Ordinance 19073, approved by the Council in March of 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, established emergency provisions for the acceptance of lawsuits against the county. And these include that the Clerk of the Council may accept lawsuits via the U.S. Postal Service and through a dedicated email address in order to reduce reliance on in-person service. On April 20th of this year, the King County Customer Service Center, located on the second floor of the King Street Center in Seattle, was open to the public. According to the executive, the new service hub is designed to be a one-stop shop for many of the most requested county services. And the Records and Licensing Service Division is located at this new Customer Service Center. Now then, proposed ordinance 2023-0174 would make several changes to the manner in which county staff service and process lawsuits. The proposed ordinance would designate the Rawls director as the agent to be served lawsuits against the county and remove the clerk of the council from that role. The proposed ordinance would also establish that lawsuits may be served via email at kcserviceofsummons@kingcounty.gov or in person Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. at the Rawls office located at the King County Service Center, but would no longer be accepted via U.S. Postal Service. Lastly, the proposed ordinance would remove from code the emergency provisions for the acceptance of lawsuits that were added under Ordinance 19703 that were adopted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are two technical amendments, one title amendment and one line amendment. If the chair would like, I can go ahead and brief those quickly.
Please.
Title Amendment T1 would correct a typo in the reference code section in the title. And Amendment 1 would make several technical changes, including fixing a typo in the reference code section, correcting a draft format error, and ensuring language consistency throughout the ordinance. That concludes my staff report. Norm Elberg, the Director of Records and Licensing Service Division, is here with us today that can help answer any questions. And with that, I'm also available for questions.
Excellent job. Thank you, Nick. Norm, do you want to add any comments as well at this time?
But no, this makes perfect sense. Norm Alberg, Director of Records and Licensing Services. My office is located on the second floor of the new King Street Center Service Center. We're optimally positioned for in-person delivery. We're there 5 days a week, and this fits well within the suite of services of Records and Licensing Services. So we've worked with the Clerk of the Council as well as PAO, and it feels like the right thing to do, and we're ready to move forward with it.
Norm, thank you again for the work you and your staff do. And I've talked to Caroline Whalen about the great things, the new location, and how it's helping people reach out to, and for us to reach back to our constituents. So thank you very much to you and your staff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As the prime sponsor of this, council member Up the Grove, do you want to move before us 2023-0174?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that proposed ordinance 2023-0174 be adopted.
Thank you. Could you also now move Title Amendment T1, which is correcting an error in the title?
Thank you. I move adoption of Title Amendment T1.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Now we have Amendment 1. Councilmember Upthgrove, could you move Amendment 1?
Thank you. I move adoption of Amendment 1.
Amendment 1 is now before us. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Now we have before us proposed ordinance 2023-0174 as amended. And I'd like to ask before, does anybody want this or object to this being on the consent and expedite? Okay. With no objection, we'll put this on consent and expedite to the May 16th full council of the Metropolitan King County Council meeting. At this time, I'd like the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Colwells.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Chair Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Chair, the vote is 4 votes to none.
By your action, proposed ordinance 2023-0174 as amended is recommended to the full county council. I believe that takes care of all of our administrative work for today. I know that Councilmember Cole Wells, representing the central part of our city of Seattle, and Councilmember McDermott representing the Stadium District, we have two major events tonight. The Mariners are playing Texas, and the Kraken are going to defeat Dallas. And I think this is going to be a great day for the city of Seattle and King County. Councilmember McDermott wanted to add a comment about the game tonight.
I just want to editorialize, Mr. Chair, and that is, I think you meant to say that the Seattle teams will beat both of their opponents.
Thank you. What did I say? Did I err again?
I'm sure you meant to say that the Mariners would beat the Rangers and that the Kraken would beat Texas, the Stars.
As usual, you're much more articulate than I am. Thank you very much. If there's no other objection, I'll see you all in the council chambers at 1:30. Thank you.